So I find, what is the problem? I've tried to put it in one sentence. It's to comfortably and happily live together for as long as possible. So with many people with a high possible comfort level for as long as possible. So can technology do this? That's a big question. As a media theorist, as a media philosopher, my first step would be to try to understand it, try to understand humanity, and try to understand our past and see if we can kind of see where it's going from there. Hey, an image is gone here. Anyway, this is part one, the history of the future, in which I'll try to go on a bit about how I think we can look at nerd history and how we can perceive nerdiness. And of course, in the beginning, we were a very religious nation, probably. We all remember images of the Dark Ages, and they're not exactly happy times. But at a certain time, we got enlightened, and modernity starts. And this is very much an era in which we no longer believe that God is the force that steers us in a certain direction, but we ourselves are capable of this change. We are the ones who have our own fate in our own hands, of course, with some scary possibilities. One of the biggest groups that believed this were the hippies. I'm trying to jump ahead a little bit. They really were all about changing society, and they believed that they could. But in 1968, at the Battle for People's Park in America, there was a big argument there over a park where a lot of hippies had planted beautiful plants, but this wasn't really allowed. It was near the university grounds, and the police. It became this big thing where the president said, "Oh, you don't go there anymore. We're going to remove the plants," and the whole thing just escalated out of control. And in the end, a few bystanders and a few students got shot, and this was really a pivotal moment in my understanding of our culture, of our Western culture, where for hippies it really became very clear that this was the point, that the state couldn't really be overturned, that there was a limit to how much you could change society in a political or peaceful way. So this is really the end song, really, of the hippie movement, where you see them going in different directions from then on. For instance, in marketing terms, you have the inner directed, which kind of evolved from there on, which are the hippies that say, well, if we can't change society, what if we all change ourselves? If enough of us do that, then the world also becomes a better place. And these later lead to become very much a start of a more egotistical time, in a way, more individualist era, as you could say. There's also some hippies who say, let's go for corporate change. In the 70s, there were a number of hippies who said, well, where is the power? The power is with companies. So we'll start companies, or we'll become CEOs. We'll change companies from the inside, and then we'll change the world through that. They later become the yuppies, in a sense. They kind of lose their ideology and become mixed up in this corporate world. And then there's the nerds who think that, no, the real power is with the media, with technology. They based their ideas largely around the words of Marshall McLuhan, who at the time had coined his famous phrase, "The medium is the message." That statement really is all about how it's not so much what's on TV that's important, but that we are watching TV. That really does more that says more about our society than what we watch, really. So these hippies, think, well, let's start our own media then. And these become the first real nerds who, start dreaming about creating their own platform for this. It's often called the birth of the Californian ideology, where you find hippie Enlightenment ideals and hippie anarchist ideas mixed up with laissez-faire economic ideas, where you find this real odd hybrid of hippies who say, yeah, let's be anarchists by building a new system. So they start creating their own media system. I mean, they even look like hippies, I always think. When you look at these early technologists, they just look like hippies. And to me, when I first realized that nerds really were hippies, a lot of things fell into place. But they're all about sharing and about free, libre, open source software, as you well know. And it's this very much this anarchist movement still there, very much about sharing, about peace, love, and happiness in a way. And of course, it's still about sex. The nerd stereotype is that we think about sex a lot. So I find this, comical, but I find it's an interesting idea. And then things progress. Vannevar Bush wrote in 1945 in his article, As We May Think. This was a period when the Second World War was over, and there was a huge scientific machine that just created the Manhattan Project. And they were trying to look for other things to do, to keep having the funding to create new research, to have money, to have bread on their plates. And he said, well, whenever logical progresses of thought are employed, that is, whenever thought for a time runs along an accepted groove, there's an opportunity for the machine. And he was very much about trying to use all this intellectual might to create a more automated society in a way, to see how computers and how calculation could create this new society. And this is really a starting point in a way, which continues in this path that I'm kind of narrating here. Then we get Gordon Moore. I'm sure you all know him, one of the founders of Intel, if I'm correct. And he had this idea that computers would get faster and faster, that chips would get cheaper and cheaper. I think I can kind of go fast on this one because I'm sure you all know this. Familiar ground. So in 1964, this computer cost $1 million. Then he in his theory of computer class formation, he says every 10 years computers get a lot cheaper and a lot smaller. So in 1970 you might have a computer that cost, or 1960 that cost $1 million. Then 10 years later it might cost 100,000, 10,000. 10 years later again 1,000, and now in theory we are at the time where our laptop should cost $100, which was of course Nicholas Negroponte's claim. I mean, here it's already becoming a desktop, really. 1984. So there we kind of get to the more nerdy part, though this already was. My own research. As a researcher, I was working at HKU, which is a higher art school in Utrecht here in the Netherlands. And we were trying to set up a new study which was all about ubiquitous computing and pervasive computing. And we were trying to teach these new students how to create this world that we thought would arrive. I mean, if computers kept getting smaller and smaller, cheaper and cheaper, then in 10, 20 years, the logical progression would be that computers would be pretty much everywhere. I mean, they could be in your cup. I mean, that's the whole idea of ubiquitous computing. Computers are everywhere, and they're all connected to each other. And we thought, it would be a great idea if we could teach kids to design this, and what should we teach them? And we found that the more we were trying to create a curriculum for them, we really had a hard time to turn these ideas of this future that Mark Weisers said was coming. He really is a name that I'll drop a lot. To create a curriculum for these people that really worked. I mean, to say, okay, I'm standing in front of the classroom. What should I teach these kids? What should be on my board? We found it very difficult to turn all this ephemerical ideology of him into